Hey everybody, hope you're enjoying Space Waves. My name's Greg Miller. I'm a senior editor with FreightWaves, an American shipper. And today I'm joined by Simon van den Dries, General Manager of Spire Maritime, coming to us all the way from Luxembourg in Europe. Simon, thanks for being with us.
Good morning. Good morning, Greg. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about using satellite technology to track maritime trade and to sort of decipher what's going on with trade flows. And I can't think of another time besides now where sort of having the eyes in the sky to make sense of what's going on out there in the ocean is more important than it is now. So very timely. And before we get to that, though, Simon, if you could just tell us a little bit about Spire and its background.
Yep. Spire Global was around 2012 founded in Silicon Valley, where we got the first small satellite up. And since then, we have grown the company. We are now about 250 people in 6 large offices around the world. We build satellites and we collect data about the Earth, and we sell the data to actually make the planet a better place. And we have several divisions. I'm heading the maritime part. We also have a similar one for aviation, for agricultural weather, and for orbital services with specialized satellites.
You know, I've always wondered with satellites how much upkeep is required. Is it just a matter of launching them and then just intaking the data, or is there a lot of maintenance that's required to keep them up in the sky every day? How important is that?
Well, we are doing nano satellites, very small satellites, 3.5 kilogram, and there's a bit of maintenance. I actually have one here, and I can show you that here. Yeah, this is one in real size. 3.5 kilogram, I can hold it in. This is what we make in Glasgow. There's a bit of maintenance to be done, but I mean, this is productizing. We make one a month of these, and we can do more if needed. Once they're up in orbit, they remain there for about 5-6 years, and after that, they de-orbit automatically. We're flying at around 500 kilometers altitude.
And so how many satellites do you have up there right now?
Right now, 102. We already launched, I think, in total more than 120. Some of them came end of life. Others didn't make it because of the launches. But the vast majority did make it, and the vast majority is still there collecting data.
Right, okay. You know, when we look at maritime trade intelligence, a lot of that revolves around AIS, the Automated Identification System, and part of that's terrestrial, and part of that's satellite. So before we discuss the trade intelligence aspect, if you could give a bit of background on, you know, what is AIS and what's the difference between terrestrial and satellite AIS?
Yeah, AIS is actually designed as an anti-collision system about 15-20 years ago when it started, to avoid people shipping crashing into each other when they come around the corner. It was more for ship to ship or for ship to shore. And unless after about 9/11, they thought, maybe we can do something. What if we throw up a satellite at 500 kilometers altitude? Can we then still receive the signal? And sure it did. So from that moment on, 2015, when the first satellites really started to gather good data, we, instead of seeing only the vessel for the first 60 miles when it leaves the coastline, now all of a sudden you can see them anytime, anywhere. We identify 250,000 vessels every day within approximately 15 to 20 minutes. We know where every vessel is every time. And yeah, it started as anti-collision. And now we have customers actually making better trade decisions, making better insurance decisions, optimizing their vessel performance, a number of things that you can do with it. And the main difference between terrestrial and satellite is that terrestrial you can look for around 60 miles, and satellite you can see anywhere in the world.
So when it comes to AIS, though, I think one of the keys is what is the information? And so you have the ship location, you have the intended destination, you have the ship class, the ship speed, and then importantly, you also have the draft of the ship, which shows how deep the ship is sitting in the water. And from that, you can extrapolate whether the ship is empty or full, right?
That is absolutely right. Yeah, these are standard features of the AIS standard. Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to do is, just as a bit of background, I used to work at a magazine called Fair Play, and the company that owned Fair Play owned another company called AIS Live, which was one of the first movers in the AIS space. Long story short, I've spent many an hour crunched over a computer screen looking at these little dots where the ships were and trying to figure out how do I get a story out of this as a journalist. And I think that's a great smell test. If for data, getting value from data, how hard is it to get a story out of this? And so what I'd like to do is I found I had different challenges for the different types of ships in terms of getting the value out of the AIS data. And I'd like to just go through my challenges with you, and then we can talk about how to overcome these challenges because I see there are some solutions out there. So let me just start with what I would think of as the easier end of the spectrum, bulk cargo commodity ships. The easiest I found was LNG. LNG carriers only carry LNG. You know how much LNG is on board. You know they're going from one LNG terminal to another. So once you have the AIS data, it's very simple to see what's going on with the LNG trade around the world. Moving on to dry bulk ships, the larger vessels, the Capesize, is also fairly simple because they generally only carry iron ore or coal. But the minute you get to smaller bulkers, Panamax or lower, it gets very complicated because the smaller ships can carry soybeans, they can carry corn, they can carry coal, they can carry all different kinds of minerals. So just knowing a Panamax is full doesn't necessarily tell you much about world trade. Moving on to the tanker sector, same pattern. The very large VLCCs, the largest tankers, unless they're on their maiden voyage out of the yards in Asia, you know they're carrying crude. They're going between the crude terminals. Fairly simple, good data there. When you get to the smaller tankers, the problem I found was that a lot of those tankers can switch from crude to products. And on the product side, it could be gasoline, it could be diesel, it can be all sorts of things. So again, it's a harder picture to decipher. And finally, the other problem I ran into was that the AIS destination data, particularly on the tanker cargo side, the initial destination wasn't always the destination because a lot of those cargoes were sort of traded multiple times en route. So those are the challenges I had, and it just goes to show that having that dot on the screen does not necessarily translate into a story or value. And so I'm wondering how you see maybe some of your clients addressing these things. Again, let's just talk about bulk commodities first and how maybe you're looking at it.
Yeah, no, great question. And it's a thing that some of our customers are doing, and we're trying to help them as much as possible. If I'm allowed to mention a few names that are great in bulk cargo, companies like Kepler, Clipper Data, Vortexa on the wet bulk side. Maybe FreightWaves is also doing in these kind of areas. But you need to have a lot of particular data around the cargo. AIS is the start. I mean, it starts with location. But once you want to know what is inside, you need to have a lot of historical data. That's mostly what we do. You can choose between having a lot of human intelligence and having a lot of machine intelligence. We're certainly facilitating the latter, which is if you know that a particular vessel for the last 10 years went to pick up wheat, so you know the type of grain is actually wheat all the times, then you can fairly surely predict that when that particular berth is there, that particular vessel, that is going to be wheat again. So it is about creating algorithms based upon the past. And if you do it properly, we have 5 to 10 years of historical data per vessel. You can enrich that by talking to local port, to inline, to inspectors. There's other data that you can have to make your algorithm smarter. And there are two types of companies. The companies in the past that you might have worked with as well, they have a lot of human intelligence, people on the ground in the ports that know what is going on. And you have people that now create algorithms. We facilitate the latter, and that's what the future is.
Okay. I would say I would add a few things also that I found is a couple ways to get around this is extremely granular data on the terminals and on the piers, because a lot of particular docks only handle particular commodities. So I've seen a lot of companies marry AIS data to very, very granular terminal data. And secondarily, as far as the ship identification, in a lot of ways, it doesn't really matter who the listed owner is. And in fact, over recent years, after the European banks have pulled back from finance, a lot of the listed owners are going to be Chinese leasing houses because people are doing a lot of sale leasebacks. What really matters is who's operating the ship. So I find a lot of the chartering data is also valuable from the shipbroker. So if you can take the AIS data, the terminal data, and the chartering data and put it all together, I think you can get a lot closer to the sort of transparency that you inherently have on the LNG side.
Yeah. No.
So now let's move on to, I think, an area of shipping which this audience may be more interested in, which is container shipping. And in some ways, it's a little bit easier because you know what the destination is going to be. You know where the ship's going. So the tracking data is very helpful in terms of seeing things like schedule reliability. But as a journalist looking into this, I ran into a couple big problems here. First would be the draft information, which is so helpful on the bulk cargo commodity ships in terms of seeing whether the ship is full or empty. With a container ship, I think the cargo mass is a very, very small part of the overall mass of the ship. You have the mass of the vessel, you have the container equipment, and you have a huge amount of mass related to the fuel and the ballast water. And the level of fuel and ballast water changes dramatically from when the ship, for example, leaves China to when it goes through the canal and finally arrives in New York. And also, container ships are almost always sort of partly full. They're going to transshipment hubs, they're putting containers off, they're bringing containers on. So, number one, I tend to question the value of the draft data from AIS in terms of extrapolating out cargo volumes on the container side. And that's really what everyone's looking for. What's the container volumes? And then you mentioned algorithms. I notice a lot of companies that I bring this problem up to tend to say, okay, well, we're going to use algorithms to show what the container volumes are going to be. And here's the problem I have with that. Coronavirus, there's been just these massive changes to the way that the markets have worked, starting with the initial shock in China in February and then here and ongoing. So when people tell me that they're using algorithms from 2018 or 2019 to extrapolate out what the container volumes are based upon AIS data, as a journalist, I don't know if that passes the smell test. So again, focusing on the container side, what do you think about all this? What do you see people doing? What are you doing?
Yeah, container side, I mean, this is not something that we directly are working on. I can see several customers working on this on the container side. I guess that local specialization is very important. If you are living and working out of Dubai port or Shanghai port, you have local information that you get into it. I think you can become a pretty good expert on it. To have a global solution for these containers and being able to do everything, you're absolutely right with your algorithms. I mean, they won't be of much value in these exceptional times that we are right now. So I think the answer is being very specialized, being very localized. I know some people that are working just on, for example, retail goods. They're just following the containers that are going into the retail stores with retail goods inside. So you need to specialize. You need to specialize on particular segments and on particular geographies. And I think that's where you need to start. That's the only way. Yeah.
Okay, so another entirely different subject beyond trade intelligence goes to sanctions and criminality. What we've seen lately is there's been a lot of ship-to-ship transfers out in the ocean, whether that involves Iranian oil trade or Venezuelan oil trade, and we can all have disagreements as to whether something actually wrong is going on here. Different countries think different things, but that doesn't really matter when it comes to a ship operator dealing with their bank or with their insurance company, or frankly with the Office of Foreign Assets Control in the United States. There are some serious penalties that arise when you break these rules, whether you believe in them or not. And I think, your kind of services can provide a lot of value to shipping in terms of avoiding these kind of risks. So we've talked already about global trade. Let's talk a bit about this aspect of sanctions compliance.
Yeah, that's a big topic. And obviously not every customer is interested in it, but we've got a lot, both on the financing side, on the insurance side, on the regulation side, the government, the non-governments. So yes, and this is where satellite, I think, makes the difference. We can see things that were invisible at the moment. We can detect automatically transshipments, and we are working with our space partners to get lightening up what they call dark vessels, the vessels that switch off deliberately the AIS. As you know, it's a manual system. You can switch it off if you want to. It's mandatory to keep it on, except for security reasons. You can switch it off. And people switch it off under that name, even though they are trying to do other things. In combination with synthetic aperture radar satellites, we have a fantastic solution together. So the traditional companies like Maxar and Airbus and the newer companies like ISAI out of Finland, they make pictures, 200 by 60 kilometers of that area. They overlay with our satellite AIS data. We know exactly which one is dark or not, and on the algorithms, the shape of the vessel and everything there, we can trace back with a likelihood which vessel that would have been. And we have done a couple of stories already on that in the news recently in cooperation with it. And I do expect much more on that. I think many ships have now understood that you can no longer hide your things in the middle of the seas. I mean, it's visible, you can make cameras, and you make a picture in the dark behind the clouds, and that synthetic aperture radar image will show up with the data. So yeah, it's a great technology. It might be still expensive and still difficult for some, but we're working with the largest governments, and I know they are making lots and lots of progress, and they're far stronger in ensuring the compliance and the regulations than ever before.
Yeah, so I guess another thing I'd like to look at is the future, obviously. When we look at all of the satellites that are out there, when we look at all of the AIS or companies that are using AIS data, I'm wondering how much further do we have to go in terms of transparency? How do you see this changing in 5 years?
Yeah, we ask ourselves that question every time. First of all, I think there's still some room to go to have better data faster. I mean, we're doing a pretty good job, but we want to make sure that we catch every single ship, like every 5 minutes. This is one. Second is that there's coming more data. There are talks about an AIS 2.0, which is they call VDES, VHF Data Exchange System, which is going to be a two-way system. So not only the ship sending information, but actually port authorities, other parts, being able to send information back to it. So that is something that we are watching closely. It might become mandatory, but that might take another 5-6 years. And everybody needs to upgrade its equipment. So to be seen, but this is certainly a place where satellites play a role. We are following this very closely. We're working with some companies in demonstrating this capability. Other than that, it's about aggregating data. As you know, our satellites also collect maritime weather, so we know the weather in the middle of the oceans. We can predict on how to avoid interruptions, get ships out of trouble. So doing the combination of maritime weather and maritime location data, it's another great area where we can all benefit from.
Well, this has all been very interesting, Simon, and as I said at the beginning, very, very timely given all that's going on in the world. I just want to thank you for being here, and also if you could just tell us where people can find out more information about your company.
Well, thank you very much, Greg, for being here today as well. If people want more information, go to spire.com, spire.com/maritime, and you will find everything.
Thank you very much.